Action movies have a unique place in pop culture. On one hand, you have the MCU, which is currently making every dollar known to man, while on the other hand, you have the likes of Pacific Rim and Shooter. Movies that, when watching them for their own sake, do not stand up to scrutiny, but always find a place in your airplane ride, your Netflix queue, or your heart. These two pieces of mental and cultural real estate seem to be in conflict with one another. So the question is, what makes for a good action movie? First, let's establish some ground rules. I will be referencing some material here in my analysis, and a full list can be found in the description below. The main two are Death of the Author by Roland Barthes and Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. These opinions are my own, and while this analysis is both qualitative and quantitative, it is not meant to dissuade anyone from liking the movies that I talk about. I'm using both a qualitative and a quantitative structure here that will be grading and giving my thoughts on 8 different sections that I've identified to be relevant to the production of a good action movie. These grades will be weighted against other variables to allow for a score to be given accurately. And with that out of the way, let's talk about a shitty action movie.
Yo, check it, yes, yo, what? I get my drink on, and play ping pong with King Kong. Dinner time, hear the bell ring, ding dong. Got a snake bitch with a pink string on. Ask Medusa, she'll tell you that the dick's long. Godzilla, play it with the pinky ring. You talk tough, but I heard you scared of blinky bling.
The first step in analyzing anything is first determining what the thing is trying to accomplish. After all, you wouldn't say a chainsaw is a shitty tool because it can't do brain surgery. At least, not well. The quality of an object is determined by both what it does and what it's trying to do. This is why I call this movie bad, because while it does well in some areas, it doesn't remotely accomplish what it intends to accomplish. It isn't fair to call it bad in comparison to Citizen Kane. That's apples to better apples. It's fair to call it bad against its peer group and its goals. So to understand why this movie is bad, we must understand what it was trying to accomplish. This concept is rather simple. The way I see it, if you're trying to make a drama where a monkey the size of an oil rig philosophizes about his purpose and the merciless march onto death, you wouldn't include the shit they included. This makes the actual aim quite obvious. This movie was attempting to capture and target the childlike wonder of watching a mutant iguana and a gorilla the size of an aircraft carrier slap the shit out of each other with commuter buses. That, as a goal, is not bad or lazy. Watching this movie could be easily summarized by me and my friends mercilessly roasting it and then being interrupted by the testosterone-fueled oohs and ahs when we see Kong stick his fist in Godzilla's mouth. That experience is fun and valuable and an easy concept to execute. Despite the simplicity of the fundamental concept, this movie managed to work around it and make an overproduced, underwritten garbage fire that was merely a regurgitation of every mistake made by their predecessors. The plot essentially breaks down as such. Godzilla and Kong exist. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you Journey to the Center of the Earth featuring Harambe's roided out cousin. 15 minutes of actual Kong vs. Godzilla action interstitially cut with Millie Bobby Brown sneaking around Mother Base. I rewatched this movie, and for the life of me, I cannot in good faith summarize it to you. Not because I care about the viewer experience. If you watch this movie on purpose, you are fully aware that you are losing 2 hours of your life that you're never going to get back. All things being equal, I would have cut this part out of the video. But my issue here is not that there is too little plot, but rather the opposite. Fundamentally, plots in any piece of narrative-based media serve a singular purpose: provide a seamless venue for the movie to accomplish its goal. In Christopher Nolan's Tenet, the plot is merely a delivery vehicle for creative shots and editing designed to give you a migraine and question your presence on Earth. The plot is secondary to the established goal. No one remembers why Leo in Inception was trying to plant information in that guy's head. All they remember is the twisty hallway fight sequence, the top spinning at the end, and the incredible camera work and editing. In the context of this movie, the same concept still applies. This movie is trying to industriously and expeditiously deliver the viewer to Kong glassing Godzilla with a battle axe the size of Lake Tahoe. Nobody watching this movie is looking for a good faith, Oxfordian, high-minded debate about the ethics of monster fighting and the plight of man. The viewer is looking to saturate their goblin brains in high quantities of monkey-based monster-on-monster crime against nuclear-powered Komodo dragons. Now let's see how many minutes it takes the movie to arrive at actual Kong vs. Godzilla violence. "43 minutes and 42 seconds. It takes them 43 minutes and 42 seconds to actually arrive at the entire point of the movie. The reason it takes this long is not because there isn't enough plot or setup, but the exact opposite. At some point, the screenwriter had to assume that the audience would give a rat's ass why building-sized monsters are kicking the shit out of each other, which is so counterintuitive. They're animals. The nature of their animal instincts inherently invalidate any deeper meaning you can assign to their action. Nobody gives a flying fuck if Godzilla wasn't hugged as a kid. It's irrelevant. Ultimately, the bloated plot of this movie chokes off its set pieces and invalidates its character development. This inevitably leads to a mentally exhausted and cognitively disengaged audience. Honest to God, a solid hour of this movie is Millie Bobby Brown committing felony burglary with an asthmatic 12-year-old and Daryl from The Office. This entire subplot literally just introduces Mechagodzilla, who has absolutely no fucking reason to be in the movie. But even if he did, it doesn't take a goddamned hour to get Mechagodzilla on screen. I swear to God, it would have made more sense if Mechagodzilla just emerged from the rubble near the end of the movie with a jug of milk and a Cuban and started ranting about Israel. It would have made more sense. Overall, this movie shoots itself in the foot repeatedly and then takes feral rat blood and pours it in the gaping wound. All from the word go. The plot is fat, aimless, and completely immaterial to the viewer experience. For reference, I'm defining writing here as plot and dialogue, and not lore and screenplays. Just the guys who write the lines and organize everything. I'm not going to discuss how the plot influenced the writing or vice versa, because honestly I think my brain will hemorrhage. Despite that, I will trek on and evaluate the writing. Now, I honestly believe that the writers are good guys who attempted to salvage the absolute prison riot nuclear accident that was the plot. There was likely very little they could do. Since the plot sounds like a second grader on PCP ranting at the playground, there isn't a writer in the lower 48 who could have crash-carted it. The band-aid they did apply, however, was brave and bold. Exposition. So much exposition. Most people even remotely interested in writing or screenwriting have heard the phrase show, don't tell. The dialogue in this movie, much like the plot, is more about telling the audience what's happening repeatedly until they see double. Every line is either a poorly done, kitschy one-liner that dates the characters and makes them look brain damaged, or a transcript of a mission briefing by feral members of the Palestinian Liberation Movement. Your choice. Would you rather be waterboarded by enough granular, arbitrary details to stun a team of plow oxen? Or would you rather prefer a Dean Martin comedy roast brought to you by Harold and Kumar go to Nickelodeon? These are your choices. I imagine that this is not a reflection of a choice foisted on the audience by the writers, but rather a choice foisted on the writers by the ghost of Kathleen Kennedy and the producers of The English Patient. Even though the writers had to compose and assign dialogue by random chance on Wheel of Fortune, I'm still going to fault them for allowing the law of large numbers to interfere with their SAG award. They could have even accidentally included some plot advancement or character development, but they didn't. Now, I have very little acting experience, so I won't go too deep on this, but I do have a couple of thoughts. Firstly, it doesn't seem the actors are aware of the characters around them, and sometimes even themselves. For example, there is an adorable little deaf girl named Gia. She's bonded with Kong in his captivity, and she taught him how to sign. Because Kong only trusts her, she acts as the primary communique between humanity and King Kong. Ignoring the fact that letting a child in your care get chummy with a monkey the size of a cruise ship is child neglect, multiple times characters in the movie who know damn well she's deaf call her name. Aloud. Even the kid's de facto guardian calls her name. Out loud.
Yeah, come on. Come on.
What's she gonna do? Turn around? I also have some questions about Millie Bobby Brown's involvement. I get the impression they signed her to do the typical typecast rebellious genius mutant teenager that she'll be strapped to until she releases a hit single. But even then, just why? On all fronts, why? Casting, development, writing, and even her own participation in work product, it seems like this movie is a social experiment to see how shitty a movie is if every crucial detail about the production is relayed to the relevant parties during a game of telephone. I'm willing to believe she tried her best, but what her character claims to want constantly exists in opposition to her actions. She has a headstrong, flagpole dick attitude that is so incongruent with her character's responsibilities and motivations. And considering that her involvement is limited to strictly bringing Robo-Guana into the picture, it's all for naught anyway. So the acting is subpar. However, it is impossible to determine what level is the actors not doing the thing, or writers passing down the steaming goat shit down the family tree. As a result, this section won't weigh into the final grade. Okay, literally no character development takes place whatsoever. No one advances in Maslow's hierarchy. Doctorates in theoretical physics make some of the worst decisions imaginable.
Power source in Hollow Earth? Sounds nuts, Nathan, even for you.
It's there! We just need Kong to bring us to it!
While military personnel waits for instructions from a glorified zookeeper.
There must be some way to disorient Godzilla. Depth charges.
It's an incongruent, dissonant mess that only magnifies and catalyzes every other flaw this movie has. Again, I don't know what level of this is the garbage fire that is the plot or the rigid Soviet writing style, but it is not going to earn this movie points. That's it. There's nothing else to be said. Set pieces are important. They contextualize the plot events and juxtapose them against a background of humanity. Even in a movie about giant monkey bonking giant lizard on the head and then playing hopscotch on a battle carrier group, the set piece matters, especially when the viewer's focus is supposed to be on the action. Set pieces are like security cameras. If they all worked perfectly, you would never know they were there. Now, all that to say, the entire movie takes place in 4 locations. Matt Gaetz' sex trafficking ring and Mexican grill, China, water, and Narnia, with the majority of the runtime taking place in Hong Kong. They were clearly cutting corners to appeal to a Chinese market, which wouldn't have mattered had the movie delivered on the appropriate payload of monster-on-monster assault and battery. But with the stunning absence of titular content of the movie, the shallow set pieces become unavoidable. Now this is actually where the movie excels. Despite the utter absence of the fights throughout the movie, the ones we do get are fucking metal. The types of battles shown in this movie is unique to the monster-on-monster fighting circuit. The fights show a brutality that only animals could accomplish. The brutality also depicts the primitive nature of Kong and Godzilla. After all, there are just asteroid-sized animals. But the audience is used to these movies overproducing the shit out of the fights until it's just CGI-enhanced UFC. But this movie took the right route with making the fights slow and animalistic in nature. Honestly, if all you want is animal-on-animal violence, just watch the uncensored cut of Planet Earth. But in the context of this movie, it delivers on the fights themselves. No amount of VFX and CGI is going to bail out a shitty story. However, the VFX that were in this movie were really well done. It's hard to actually tie a quantitative score to this variable because it's going to change again in 10 years and again 10 years after that. But you can really tell that some animators and VFX guys really poured their heart and soul into one part of the movie that they knew they could redeem. They did great work. Ultimately, this movie is just bad, in a genre that so desperately needed a win. I wouldn't rewatch this movie, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I'd honestly prefer people spike a bang energy with Benadryl and see what happens, or steal copper pipe from their nearest church or synagogue. These are more productive and edifying uses of your time. People rewatch movies to try and replicate at some level the enjoyment they had watching the movie the first time, which could be doable, but after 2 hours of Millie Bobby Brown's bizarre B&E adventure and Kong treating the USS Nimitz like a longboard, I just can't recommend it even for that. A peacekeeping tour in the Gaza Strip would be less traumatizing than this movie. The total weighted score for this movie is a 3 out of 10. I honestly think that's high, but the math doesn't lie. Now you're probably thinking, I can think of plenty of movies that try monkey-based political revolution, and I would be inclined to agree with you. This movie was a swing and a miss, but what about the movies that foul it off? In other words, what about the movies that made it, but barely?